Again, welcome. My name is Andrea Miller. I'm the executive director of Center for Common Ground, and welcome to our effective advocacy. We do these trainings, if you will, every month with our partners at the Workers Circle. And our whole idea is to give you actions and activities that you can take in your own hometown. It's very important for people to understand that advocacy does not have to be in Washington, D.C., it can be wherever you are. Tonight, we are going to be talking about and focusing on the cost of the regime. Next slide. Now, this is welcome, so this is about as good as it gets. We'll be covering renewing the calls for DC statehood, the current bills, Trump ordering the National Guard to invade our cities, having the National Guard come to your cities is not free. And then how the DC residents are fighting back. And then we're going to go and visit our old friend, the SAVE. It basically is zombie legislation. Just when you think it's dead, it shows up being introduced somewhere else. And then, of course, we will give you upcoming actions that you can do. Renewing the calls for statehood. Josie, do you want to do this?
Hang on, I have to unmute myself. Yeah. So the reason we wanted to start today's call with renewing the call for DC statehood is because the National Guard being in Washington, D.C. is about DC statehood. The National Guard was ordered to basically take over the police force in DC. And this is a huge issue because, as many of you already know, the residents in Washington, D.C. do not have voting power in Congress. They have representatives that they elect, but they do not have voting power. DC, as Andrew put in the chat, is 48% Black. It is a majority minority, would be a majority minority state, I believe the first one. And the call for statehood has been an ongoing battle that we've been fighting for in the voting rights space for many years. And every year, we have the bill, the Washington, D.C. Admissions Act, that's been introduced. This year, Senator Van Hollen from Maryland introduced it in the Senate with 43 co-sponsors, all Democrats. And then Representative Norton, who is the Washington, D.C. representative, always carries the bill in the House. And there are already 203 co-sponsors, so there are a lot of co-sponsors on this bill, but we really need more support. And this is one really important way that you can take legislative action to kind of at least try to get the National Guard out of DC. There's also a resolution recognizing the historical significance of emancipating the nation's capital on the anniversary of Lincoln's signing the District of Columbia Compensated Emancipation Act, which basically said this was the first freed, Angie, you can maybe jump in here too, the first freed city.
Yes, it was the first freed slaves. So again, based on where DC is, DC, there were slaves in Washington, DC. And so this was the very first group of slaves that were freed because it was DC and the president was there. Yes.
Yeah. So with the federal government invading DC, a city that already, as the license plate says, taxation without representation, is paying these taxes, does not have representation in Congress, voting power. And now the federal government has decided that they get to also take over the streets of where DC residents live. So that's why we wanted to start with this. DC statehood is very much directly related to the National Guard taking over our capital. But as many of you know, unfortunately, the National Guard takeover goes beyond Washington, D.C., and it affects all of us. For some of us on this call, the National Guard has been in our city, like in Los Angeles, or is coming to our city, like Memphis, another majority Black city. Under this guise of trying to fight crime, Trump has threatened Chicago and New Orleans with the National Guard. Up to 19 cities, I believe, are on his list to invade. And he says this is to address crime, but really it's this attempt to intimidate residents in progressive cities, also primarily Black cities or cities with a lot of voters of color. And oftentimes, most of these places, crime has already been going down because the community is already taking care of itself. And having the National Guard coming in to invade is a huge, unprecedented threat to our freedom, our safety, and our democracy. It's very dangerous, and using the National Guard to occupy our cities for political gain is an attempt to undermine our democracy. And it costs us, the American people, a whole lot of money to do this. So it's not only an attack on our freedoms, but we have to pay for that attack on our freedoms. So Andrea is going to cover that now.
It was very, very interesting looking up what this occupation, because there's really no other word to use for it, was costing. So it was interesting when the White House moved the Washington Metropolitan Police under federal control and brought in 800 National Guard members to the Capitol. Basically, they were spending about a little more than $1 million a day. So when they sent them to Los Angeles, that was $134 million for 60 days. So again, when they bring the National Guard in and they bring them into a city, they are not in tents. They are being put up in hotels. And again, DC hotel rooms, if you've ever had to rent one, are not inexpensive. Next slide. One of the, yes, large urban deployments can exceed $8,900 per person per day. Standard per diem for meals and lodging and run $200 to $350. But extra mission cost drive totals higher. Where are they located? What is the duration? We normally expect to see the National Guard when they are providing disaster relief, because generally they're bringing in more equipment, we've got more fuel cost. So the other forces may cost less, but they offer reduced capabilities. So the other issue is after the National Guard leaves, when they look at the equipment that they use, they may have to repair equipment, they may need to replace equipment. Plus, depending on what equipment they bring, that equipment could damage city streets and roads, because our roads are really built for regular automobiles, not military grade automobiles. Next slide. Now, members of Congress said, well, wait a minute. The mayor of Los Angeles, the governor, they did not ask for the National Guard to come here. So is it even legal for the president to deploy the National Guard when the state government did not ask for them, and on top of everything, did not want them? So again, my favorite person, Pete Hegseth was unable to come up with any law, resolution, or anything that explained why it was legal to deploy the National Guard. And again, when they look at the amount of money they were going to spend, $134 million to send in the Guard for nothing. This should have been for Congress and was a major, major, major red flag. Because again, remember, a lot of this is occurring at the same time that they are working on the budget and they are cutting food for children, they are cutting health care for disabled adults and everybody. But they are spending all this money on the National Guard. Next slide. Now, there had been talk from the Trump administration that people who were unhoused were potentially going to be gathered up and imprisoned. There was even talk about putting them in detention camps. Literally, they wanted to make being unhoused a crime. Well, when you look at the cost of what they spent to deploy the Guard, and you look at what it would cost to house the entire unhoused population of Washington, D.C., the daily expense was 4.3 times greater than the daily cost of operating public housing in DC. And again, remember, part of the city is crime ridden was the president was pointing at the homeless. If you have spent time in DC, the homeless that are on the street, they may ask for money, but the homeless are not the way the president made it sound, routinely attacking people. That was not the case. Next slide. When we look at 6 states, Louisiana, Mississippi, Tennessee, Ohio, South Carolina, and West Virginia, we are talking about roughly 30,000 people who do not have a permanent address. They are unhoused. If we wanted to operate a safe shelter for all the homeless in those 6 states, it would be less than a single day of the DC occupation. Next slide.
All right. Good evening, everyone. My name is John. I'm the Democracy Center IT lead at Center for Common Ground, and I just want to take a couple moments to talk to you about what a grand jury is and what role they play, and how DC residents are resisting. So to start off, grand juries are one of the most critical but sometimes misunderstood component of the criminal justice system. Unlike a jury trial, grand juries, both in local and federal cases, has a different function altogether. It decides whether there's enough evidence when someone is arrested for a crime that is a felony to charge them with that felony crime formally. So there's a couple key facts to what a grand jury is, and it generally consists of 16 to 23 citizens, and they can normally be impaneled for up to 18 months. I'm saying all this because prosecutors then present evidence and they can call witnesses to testify, but defense attorneys are not present during these proceedings. So what grand juries actually do is they examine evidence and hear testimony. They then ask questions and discuss the facts presented. after which they determine whether there's a probable cause to indict a suspect. And at that time, they would issue an indictment or a true bill of indictment. So what role do they play in DC? So they play a pretty complex role because there's a lot of federal cases and high profile complex felony cases that happen in DC, and some of those involve government corruption, white collar crimes, and national security issues. And so a lot of this can be shrouded in secrecy. And so one of the defining aspects of a grand jury is to you know, have these proceedings held behind closed doors. So people like the media and others aren't allowed in. Just the juries, the prosecutors, witnesses, and court reporters. Now, leading on to the fact that after all of this, federal grand juries tend to indict, but federal grand juries rarely decline to indict. And recently, we've seen this happen on multiple cases. And I wanted to highlight how DC residents are fighting back by refusing to indict after multiple attempts. For example, the man who threw a Substop sandwich at the National Guard. So, and that is my report on grand juries.
Thanks, John. And I'm smiling. I'm going, oh my goodness. I'm sure the National Guardsman standing there with an armed and loaded weapon feared for his life.
He's just door dashing, right?
So, hi everyone. I'm Francesca Rubinson. I'm the senior social justice organizer at the Worker Circle, and just add on to John's great, just update on what's been going on with the DC grand jury. So, as people were kind of just wanted to connect to what people were pointing out in the chat, that the National Guard who've been deployed to DC and are occupying in this way that they're not intended to be operating. They have been arresting people, including this protester that John was referring to, who threw a sandwich at a National Guardsman, and then just the fact that DC residents on the grand juries are coming together and refusing to move those cases forward because they don't think they meet the standards of a felony is this kind of subtle way of resistance, but one in which we're kind of mucking up the gears of the machine that would continue to imperil and harm DC residents. So I think that's such a great example, and I liked that Banksy art piece there that John included with the sandwich in the hand of the protester. So a little bit more about how people can fight back against what's been going on in DC, this occupation by the National Guard, no matter where you are. So one thing that everyone can do is we can check out what our friends and coalition partners at Free DC are doing. They're a great nonprofit organization that focuses on community organizing in DC, often for DC statehood and other issues, and been a lot to bring the D community together to keep each other safe during this time. And they also have some calls to action for allies across the country. So that includes reaching out to your representatives, calling your congressperson, your representatives, your senators, telling them to get federal forces out of DC now. And it's especially important. I know we have people on the call from all over the country. If you are in one of the states where people from the National Guard have been deployed to DC, it's really important to call not only your congresspeople, but your governors who have control of the National Guard to say, hey, I live in Tennessee. I don't want my National Guards people deployed to DC where they're, as we're saying, both intimidating and harassing, my, fellow people, but they're also, wasting money and not ready to respond to any emergency situations that might be happening in our state. You never know when a natural disaster could happen. So that's a really powerful call you can make if you are in Tennessee, Mississippi, Louisiana, West Virginia, Ohio, and South Carolina that have all had National Guard deployed to DC at different times over the past few weeks. And yeah, like Andrea's noting, right now is hurricane season. We don't want the National Guard to be, doing this harmful and unnecessary, patrolling of DC when they could be instead, serving the communities they come from. So that's one thing we can all do. Also, I saw people in in the comments or in the chat, also mentioning No King's Day. If has anyone here, if please share in the chat if you feel like it, if you participated in the No King's Day protests earlier this year in April, and also around there have been, you know, many other protests at the local level, at the national level, but the next big day of action that's coming up is taking to the streets with the No King's Day Coalition, which the Workers' Circle and the Center for Common Ground are a part of, on October 18th. So that's just under a month away. Here's another link in the chat to get a little sense of how many of these events, protests are already planned. So this is another way to make your voice heard. And yeah, it's great to see there's already hundreds of protests planned all across the country. So hopefully you can find one that's close to you, or you can also host your own. So make sure you check that out. Another thing you can do, another quick action for today, but still very impactful, is you can write to your Congress people. Oh yeah, I'm seeing lots of people saying they're ready for October. That's amazing. We can also write to our Congress people about the NDAA, the National Defense Authorization Act. This is a bill that authorizes funds for the Pentagon, which ultimately oversees the deployments of federal troops to cities and towns. And so we can call on our Congress people to, you know, not just ratify this bill as usual. It's an annual bill that comes up every time, but it's one that can really be used to show our displeasure over the way in which federal troops have been deployed to DC. So that's another way you can make your voice heard with your congressperson. And then I did also want to share a little bit more in depth. We've been talking a lot about the National Guard, but another federal force that's been really weaponized and deployed against our neighbors, against our communities in, since the start of the second Trump administration has been ICE, has been this really, horrific and aggressive way in which ICE is being used not only to arrest undocumented folks, but immigrants with all kinds of legal statuses and even citizens as well. And this is something that I know is deeply concerning to me, and especially coming from the Workers' Circle, which was founded by Eastern European Jewish immigrants. This is something that's really close to my heart, pushing back against ICE and against this kind of aggressive and harmful mass deportation machine. So the Workers' Circle and the Center for Common Ground have been supporting the growing movement of vigils outside of detention centers that are drawing attention to the inhumane conditions in which people are being detained and treated there, the way in which this is affecting their families and our communities so horribly. You may have heard of the detention center known as Alligator Alcatraz, or the Everglades Detention Center. So the Workers' Circle and a lot of our coalition partners have been holding a vigil outside of the Everglades Detention Center for, I believe, almost 8 or 9 weeks now. It's been growing and gaining more attention. More people of faith and conscience, including many clergy people, as you can see in the photo, attending these vigils. So if you are in Florida, those vigils are now happening not only by the Everglades Detention Center, but in Sarasota and Tallahassee, in front of and drawing attention to many other detention centers around Florida. And they will also be, hopefully this movement of vigils and protests outside of detention centers will continue to grow across the country. So wanted to share that with the Effective Advocate community, and to encourage you all, if you are in Florida, to see if you can participate in those vigils, and to keep an eye out for other ways to stand up for our immigrant friends and neighbors in the coming weeks. Thank you. And I'll have more information on those vigils happening in Florida and how to get connected will be in our follow-up email.
Yeah. Thank you, Francesca. Yeah, we just covered a lot of what people can do, a lot of different actions. All these links in the chat, don't worry, they will be in the follow-up email. But all is to say, whether you live in DC or not, whether your city is going to be occupied by the National Guard, there is a lot that you can do to make sure that I don't even know if we can say administration, the regime knows we aren't going to sit silently by as they try to attack our communities and make us pay to be intimidated. One other way and we want to talk about this, we mentioned this in the beginning, that the administration is continually trying to come for our freedoms, especially the freedom to vote, is with the SAVE Act. The SAVE Act, I'm sure most of you have heard about through us, was a bill in Congress that basically would have meant you need to show a birth certificate or a passport in order to register to vote. This is an incredibly limiting set of documents that would make millions of eligible Americans unable to register to vote or update their voter registration for various reasons. Maybe they're married and they changed their last name but never updated their birth certificate. Maybe they don't have access to a passport or their birth certificate because it was destroyed in a natural disaster, or you never really got one when you were born. There's so many reasons that this is an incredibly dangerous piece of legislation. And because of your advocacy and the advocacy of other organizations, this bill basically died in Congress, but now it's making its way to try and pass through the, oh my gosh, the EAC, the Election Administration Commission. Is that correct?
Elections Assistance Commission.
Elections Assistance Commission. The American First Legal Foundation has created basically a petition to try to slide the SAVE Act in through the EAC. It's the exact same rules that the SAVE Act has, but instead of Congress passing it, the EAC would adopt these standards instead. This is incredibly dangerous, and we want to make sure, just like we did with the SAVE Act in Congress, that we let the EAC know this is not okay and we won't stand for it. And we are asking you to please consider leaving a short public comment. You can leave a public comment until October 20th. And if someone could put the link in the chat, I'm unable to with the slides up. You can do that right now. The EAC is the Election Assistance, I forgot it already, a commission. Andrea, can you talk a little bit more about what they do and why this is dangerous?
The whole idea for having the EAC, the Elections Assistance Commission, is this is the group that was tasked with helping Americans vote, or looking at what is voting looking like. Are there challenges that we are seeing? And are there procedures and processes that we can implement to make voting easier? This is literally bastardizing the whole point of the Elections Assistance Commission, because they're supposed to make elections easier and more efficient. This is now making voting harder.
Yeah. And so we ask that you please submit a public comment. I know Andrea put the link in the chat. We have some sample messages here in the slides. I'll also make sure we share those in the follow-up email so that you have time to submit a public comment. It really only has to be 1 to 2 sentences, but it does make a big difference. And Francesca, go ahead.
Oh yeah, I was going to say, I think because I think we have enough time in our program, I think we'd like to take 5 minutes right now for everyone to put that link in your browser, make a short public comment, and if you even have extra time, you could go back to that free DC link and also write to your Congresspeople opposing the National Guard deployment to DC. So we'll give everyone a couple minutes to do that, and feel free to put in the chat when you finished, or what you said or what your response was if you do get someone on the phone. I'll repost Josie just put the public comment link, and I'll put the free DC action link too.
Yeah. And I'll stop sharing my screen, and I'll even put these sample messages in the chat to make things a little bit easier for you all as you leave a public comment.
The things that I'm seeing in the chat is I'm looking at people's notes about their anti-ICE protests. And again, I just have to remind people, when you go to protest like this, do not bring your phone. Get a burner phone. pay cash for it. Your phone, even when it's not on, is forever sending out a locator beam. How do you think they were able to identify the people who were at the Capitol on January 6th? They were able to identify them through their phone. Your phone leaves a very long and deep footprint. We can track the presence of a phone for up to 90 days. So if you must have a phone, get a burner phone. Do not bring your regular yes, this is really important for operational security. We're working on some other things that will really help us with the work that we are doing. Our program Ask Alert is now in its fourth iteration. I dropped the link in the chat, askalert.now. You can sign up for that. It will give you a dashboard. From your dashboard, you now can create multiple channels. What is a channel? A channel is an area where you are going to send messages. People subscribe to your channel with a link where they enter no information at all or a QR code where again they enter no information at all. Fast Alert, if you install it on your phone, installs directly at your phone's operating system. It totally bypasses the App Store where you are identified by name, email, and phone number. And it goes straight into the operating system of your phone. Fast Alert will allow you to broadcast images, phone numbers, links, or just the message itself. So just wanted to put that in as a response to what I was seeing in the chat.
Yeah, thank you, Andrea. It's important.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's very important.
I was gonna add too, this is reminding me of a couple months ago when we had an effective advocate where he talked about going to protests and different kinds of protests and how to prepare. And just made me think of also not all protests and rallies and actions are exactly the same. So it's always a good thing to sort of think about your own risk factors, your own tolerance for risk. There might be a big difference between going to a rally that's designed for families, people to bring their kids to learn about democracy and civic engagement versus a kind of protest that might involve a kind of direct action where people are maybe blocking the street and things like that. So always good to think about too as we're contemplating going to protests, to do a little bit of research as much as you can to try to figure out what to expect and how to prepare yourself for just the kind of action it might be. So there's always some unpredictability. Yeah, how's everyone doing with making their calls and leaving their comments? Have people been able to successfully leave a comment? Seems like some people are still asking some questions, seeing some thumbs up. Wonderful.
Nice. Alrighty, well, we'll dive into just some upcoming events and actions that you can get involved with beyond fighting back against the National Guard. And then we'll make sure to take time and space to answer some of the great questions that folks have been asking in the chat. So I'll start and Andrew, you can plug in, but us at the Center for Common Ground, for those of you who do not know us, we do get out the vote work. That is our bread and butter. And right now, Virginia is our main focus. We're trying to mobilize as many Black voters as possible across the state. We're doing that through postcards, which I know the Workers' Circle is working with us on, phone banks, and we've also got canvassers, but we are holding our first update next week to kind of go over the state of play in Virginia and how you can tap into that. We have our next Effective Advocate. This is a monthly event and training that we do starting on will be Wednesday next month on October 22nd. And then for the Virginia election, we are holding guided phone banks every Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday to call Black voters. And we highly, highly encourage you come on to one of these trainings. I know phone banking is intimidating for a lot of people. I myself also dislike it, but I promise when you join one of our trainings, you get to be with other volunteers and really learn how to make calls. You're usually leaving voicemails, and you also get to know that you are really helping increase voter turnout. Our phone calls, leaving a voicemail increases turnout by about 5%. And when you get a voter on the phone, not only are they happy to hear from you, but you're also increasing turnout by about 17%. So it really does make a huge difference. So please join us on one of our guided phone banks. And if you are feeling up to it, the Worker Circle is coming to Virginia, right to actually where Andrea lives. So you'll also get to meet Andrea to Canvass in Virginia from October 24th to 26th. So it's going to be a lot of fun. Don't worry, again, we'll share all of these links in the follow-up email with you. But also say there's a lot of ways that you can hang out with us and get involved with us, and we hope to see you at some upcoming events. And I see in the comments a lot more folks are submitting public comments, which is amazing. Thank you for doing that. And Judith, yes, we can share the links in the chat, and I will make sure they also all are sent again in the follow-up email. So I'm going to stop my share.
Oh,
Go ahead.
I was just going to add really quickly, I'm going to put, again, you'll get all these links in your follow-up email, but one more link to where you can sign up to Canvass in Virginia with the Worker Circle. We would be so thrilled to have you if you are in the Virginia and the DC area and you're able to, drive or you can take the train pretty easily to where we're canvassing in Caroline County. We would love to have you join us. We'll be a multi-generational group, people of all ages. I'm organizing some college students to come out and join us. We'll have, oh my gosh, Susan, you're coming, or no, you're commenting. But if anyone is interested and has more questions about what exactly that Canvass will look like, we also have an FAQ document about what we'll be doing, but it'll be about a weekend of door knocking and of community with people who care about voting rights and racial justice and helping to get out the vote in a really important bellwether election for where lots of important state house races are at stake in Virginia, as well as sort of helping us see what 2026 may look like. Andrea, do you want to add anything else about the Virginia races we'll be door knocking for?
Yes, we are door knocking for a very, very, very lovely lady that I have come to know. This is one of the best candidates. Actually, this is the best candidate we have ever had run in this district. And the other thing that is really, really great about this candidate is she is currently elected to the Spotsylvania School Board. And normally in this House district, we do pretty good in Caroline, but it used to be Spotsylvania. It would just all be over. Now there's been 8 new huge apartment complexes built in Spotsylvania. And Spotsylvania is very, very different. The canvas will be a lot of fun. I'm having everybody come over to my house on Saturday, and it will be a cookout. People, as they come in, if they get in early enough on Friday, will have pizza night at my house. No, I don't do pizza. I cook real food. So we'll be having real food on Saturday, and it will be a marvelous time. And if you have never predominantly canvassed Black voters, people are not mean. They are not going to be mean. They are not going to yell at you. They are not going to tell you, you are the 10th person who's knocked on my door. Because in all reality, you may be the first and only person who knocks on their door.
Yes, and because we're not telling them who to vote for, they tend to be also a bit more receptive. All
Oh,
right.
and then I've got the nonpartisan voter guide, so I'm going to drop those links in the chat just so that people get a chance to see who is running for office in Virginia. So I'm dropping 3 voter guides: governor, lieutenant governor, and all 100 of Virginia's House seats are up for election. So you've got all 3 voter guides.
Great. Well, now that or wrapping up to our kind of our end, I know I saw one question in the beginning that I wanted to make sure we get to, which is where/how can people get accurate information about National Guard deployments? There were a lot of rumors floating around about the National Guard coming to Oakland a few weeks ago, and that caused some panic. It's a really great question. I actually today, honestly, the way that I was getting more, the most accurate and up-to-date information was just Google searching, because I also wasn't sure at first, wait, how many cities are actually living with National Guard deployments as we speak? How many are awaiting the National Guard? So I often do a Google search and look at reliable news sources. I know the Brennan Center is a good resource, Democracy Docket. These are 2 just great news sources that you can get updates from. But I don't know, Andrea or Francesca, if you all have other recommendations there.
I had done a search and then through Bing, and Bing just gave me a big long list of articles about potential National Guard deployments. Now, again, remember, we're dealing with someone who, the moment there's another shiny object, oh, he's not going to do that. He forgot about it. He's going to go do something else. So it's one thing for the administration to say they're deploying the National Guard. It's kind of another thing. Do they actually get around to sending them, or does something happen where they lose focus and then they're off running around doing something else?
Yes, or the case of Chicago where he was going to do it, but because of local activism and the governor being so, and the mayor of Chicago being so against the National Guard coming into the city, Trump for now has stepped back, though at the UN conference again, he suggested that he will be back in bringing the National Guard to Chicago. So it does unfortunately change at the whim of our president sometimes. And we had one more question here too. Any other advice or resources in addition to what's available from the Free DC project regarding rights of citizens when the National Guard is deployed, protecting ourselves and staying safe, and other ways to protest nonviolently? I know Francesca mentioned that No King's Day is having a training maybe at 8 p.m. Eastern today that might cover some of that on a national scale. But I do think Free DC is probably the best resource for DC level rights and protections. And then John, I think, shared something in the chat earlier too, that
Yes, I dropped the link for a prepare to protest. It's an activist checklist that has a lot of very good and enhanced security measures that you can do to your devices, cell phone, all that type of stuff, and has step-to-step guides to it. So it's not very hard to work through some of these things, or you can just leave your phone at home, that type of stuff. But it gives you a lot of safe ways to be an effective advocate at a protest.
thank you.
I was just going to add too, as another just good reputable source for learning about, your rights when you might be in a space with the National Guard or with federal, federal troops of different kinds. The ACLU is always a great place to go for learning about the rights of protesters. You can also go state by state and look at, like, for example, I often look at NYCLU, the New York Civil Liberties Union, for more specific information about the state that I'm in and what my rights are at a protest versus in my home versus on a university campus, for example. And I just wanted to share the ACLU also has this initiative called Firewalls for Freedom, where they're kind of urging states to put state level protections in place kind of against federal overreach and attacks on civil liberties and civil rights. So another good place to go for information and just for ideas of ways you can be an effective advocate for protections for civil liberties at the state or local level.
Great, thank you. And we have one question here, Andrea, is probably for you. If Congress were to grant statehood, how could the necessary constitutional carve out for a separate federal capital district be designed to ensure it maintains its unique function as the seat of the federal government without disenfranchising the residents of the new state while preventing undue political influence over federal operations? So how could they coexist?
It's written literally into the bill, where the bill basically says the entire federal enclave, anything that is the seat of the federal government, the executive, the White House, the congressional buildings, the courts are outside the state of New Columbia. They will remain the federal district. Also, there are other federal lands that are in technically the city of Washington, D.C. All federal lands will automatically remain with the federal government. So they very carefully write that into the bill each time. Federal lands will remain federal lands. We don't want that responsibility. No.
Thank you, Andrea.
I think there were a few questions about Trump's recent attacks on James Comey. I don't know if anyone, if Andrea or Josie or John, you have any thoughts on this or anything? Sharing, I think it was kind of breaking news or
that he's indicted.
That's not something that I'm following right now. Again, the election is going, and I mentioned earlier, 120,652 people have already cast their ballots during early voting. Early voting started Friday, September 19th. That is a 117% increase in voter turnout over 2021, our last gubernatorial election.
That's huge.
Incredible.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, yes.
And that's because of the work that we do together with the Workers' Circle and partners on the ground, because we talk primarily about early voting and why it's so important that you vote early when you have the option to do so.
Well, and one of the other things that we know is happening in 2021, we were basically the only group talking about early voting. And back in 2021, Republicans generally looked at early voting and they called it voter fraud. So they did not participate in early voting. Glenn Youngkin, our current Republican governor, really believes very strongly in early voting, and he has made a huge push to get the Republican vote out early as well. So it is both Democrats and Republicans, and we won't really know until election day, just because the district had previously been Republican. Did the voters who came out vote that way?
Yeah.
Or did they change because of the things that are happening with the big ugly bill? And again, remember, Virginia is right on the other side of the river from DC. 32,000 Virginians have lost their job. and there are more job losses coming. Virginia is home to 350,000 federal slash former federal workers. And anyone who knows a federal worker knows that even those that currently still have their job, they are concerned about keeping that job.
Any other questions for us about the National Guard, the EAC, and leaving a public comment, elections, No King's Day, whatever is on your mind? Please let us know in the chat.
And I would love to see you on one of the phone banks. I'm normally on phone banks every Tuesday and every Thursday. I talk a little bit about the area in Virginia that we are calling. And I will tell you now, 95% of the time, if we are calling a suburban or an urban area, you are not going to talk to anybody. You are going to just leave voicemail messages. And we have made our calling even more efficient. We have a dialer, and our dialer is set to look for voicemails or live humans. So you aren't going to get this number has been disconnected. Nope, those are gone. You are going to talk to a machine or a person. So you can make a lot more voter contacts in a much shorter time.
Yes, Judith, there is so much to digest. There's always so much coming at us these days.
Yeah.
And we tried to go light on you today.
Janet,
And
I'm not sure I know
I
anything.
haven't heard anything really about that, except for there's a meeting scheduled for next week, but I'm not really sure. A lot of what I've been reading in the chat kind of happened recently in the news, guys. So um, I'm interested in finding out, but yeah, I don't have a comment for you at this time, Janet. Sorry.
Yeah, and I'm seeing comments about people working in California for Prop 50. So another reason, if you could join us in Virginia, so many of our California allies, and we understand they now have a need to work in their own state. Normally during a regular election, California is California. They're going to do just fine. So we need people who maybe have never done phones before to join us on our phone banks. Get used to it now. You're going to get spoiled. You're going to get used to leaving messages and not talking to humans. But it's a start. You've got to start somewhere.
Yeah. In New York City, we also have our big mayor's race. So a lot of our New York City people are focused on that local election. So if you are not in California or NYC and have some capacity to make calls and help with our turnout effort in Virginia, that would be wonderful.
Yeah. Otherwise, keep up the good work. It's also great that folks are working in their communities and doing some local organizing.
Yeah, I was seeing some comments about the New Jersey elections as well. And, it's never a bad thing to be involved in your local elections. We always encourage you to do that. And if you have a little extra time and energy to give to some of these, efforts we're highlighting, that's what we're here to do, to kind of help in what seems so chaotic, to kind of give you all some tools and some actions to take for some good direction for democracy.
Alrighty, well, I guess with that, we can wrap up. Thank you to everybody who left comments today, public comments. I love the ones that you all shared in the chat. They're really great responses. Please share it with your friends and family. And again, you'll get all this information tomorrow afternoon in a follow-up email, along with the recording and the slides. So thank you all so much for being here.
Thank you.
And keep up the amazing work, and maybe you'll see some of you all at No King's Day in New York City.
Maybe I'll see some of you in Virginia.
Yeah. Alrighty.
Good night.
Everybody